Epiphany rather than Christmas. Well, it wasn't that they didn't believe in Christmas, it's just that the church hadn't got around to assigning a day for it yet. But they did know, being Egyptian Christians, that they wouldn't have been Christians if the mission of Christ had not reached them. And that mission had a beginning. And so the stories of the Epiphany were held all together. We tend to split them up. The visit of the wise men, the flight into Egypt to escape Herod, the baptism of Jesus in the Jordan, and the first miracle at Cana of Galilee. And all those stories were sort of strung into a narrative. And it was a narrative about passing on what Jesus had begun, beginning. Well, obviously, there was a beginning in his birth. There was a beginning for all of us in our births. Our parents hadn't the foggiest idea what we were going to turn into, and might have been quite alarmed if they hadn't. But that beginning as a baby is a long way away from what comes next. What becomes of us, what is made of us. And so the story of Jesus' baptism is a story of a real beginning, a conscious beginning to do that which his Father had promised that he should do. Now, all of you have been baptized. Some of you as babies, some of you as adults, perhaps. And you know that we believe that in baptism, a covenant is established, an agreement, not just any old agreement, not just the sort of agreement when somebody says, I'll meet you at 10 o'clock on Friday morning. But a solemn agreement, rather like the agreement we make in matrimony. I will be with you and for you till death us do part. And in the baptism of Jesus and in our own baptisms, God says, I'm going to be with you through it all, and I have a mission for you. A mission for me. I mean, it's all very well to talk about a mission for Jesus, because we understand that he came in order to live and die and rise again for us. But a mission for us, in a world where much is taken up in doing the things we have to do, the idea of being in mission for God gets sort of lost. And if it has anything to do with church, it also tends to get lost in my needs. What do I need? Am I getting what I need? In reversing and putting on its head who we are and what we are called to be. It's easy to do because we do it in all our relationships. in our marriages. What am I getting out of this? In our jobs, what am I getting out of this? In our entertainment, what am I getting out of this? When the wise men came to Jesus and gave him myrrh in the package, if Jesus had been a bit older, he might have said, what am I getting out of that? A symbol of his death. If he could have seen as a baby what would happen to him as he served God, he might have said, and what am I getting out of that? And yet, his mission was not to get something out of it. His mission was to give. And in our better moments, we know that in love, in being with somebody, in committing to someone, it's better when we concentrate on what we give, rather than grumbling about whether we've received it. So why do we find that such a difficult concept when it comes to church? Odd, isn't it? In baptism, God made a covenant with you and with me, just as he did with Jesus. And the covenant may not be to your liking, but that's tough because it's happened. He said, you're going to be my witness. Well, thank you very much. I don't want to be your witness. Can't I just be your witness by being nice? Well, we probably fail at that. Doesn't that word witness mean martyr, life giver? Well, I've got all sorts of things I want to give my life to. I'm not sure I want to give my life to religion. Isn't religion all about my getting something to give me strength to get through all the things that I'm giving my life to? And that's an idea that gets so ingrained in our minds that it makes it almost impossible for us to keep the covenant that God has made for us. What if Jesus had gone around saying, God, I want. God, give me. He only once said, if it is possible, take this from me. And then he corrected himself and said, nevertheless, not my will, but thy will be done. Epiphany reminds us that God's grace is given to us in order that we may keep the covenant that was made between God and us in our baptisms. To be life givers in the world. This doesn't mean we've all got to become clergy or something like that. For we can give our lives to God and to Christ in doing those things that we do every day of our life. But differently. In being selfless. In being caring. In not making demands. And we practice that in church and as the church. I'm always so disappointed. I shouldn't be after 45 years in ministry when I hear that people are grumbling that they're not getting what they need out of the church. I want to say, poor dears, and pat them on the head and say, go back to catechism. It's pathetic. What am I getting out of it? My needs are not being fulfilled. Sounds like somebody ready for the divorce court. We are to give and not to count the cost. To fight and not to seek to fight and not to heed the wound, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and to ask for no reward, save that of knowing God's will. Notice that last bit in that wonderful old prayer. To ask no reward, save that of knowing we do God's will. So Epiphany is not just about Christ's beginning to do his Father's will, as the dove comes from heaven and says, this is my beloved, in whom I'm well pleased. It is an annual moment when we take stock of our discipleship and pray that God looks upon us and points to us and says, this is my daughter, this is my son, my beloved, in whom I am well pleased. Amen. Let us stand and profess our faith in the words of the Nicene Creed.